Stop explaining yourself. The Stoic mindset that commands respect. You are doing something right now that is silently destroying your power, your respect, and your peace of mind. And the worst part? You don't even know you're doing it. Every single day, you wake up, you go through your life, and you hand pieces of yourself over to people who never asked for them, and never deserved them. You explain your choices. You justify your decisions. You defend who you are. And every single time you do it, every single time you open your mouth to explain yourself to someone who hasn't earned the right to understand you, you are making yourself smaller. Welcome to Stoic Mindset. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because what you are about to hear over the next hour could fundamentally change how you carry yourself through this world. Today, we are going deep. We are talking about one of the most powerful, most misunderstood, and most underused principles in all of Stoic philosophy. The discipline of silence. The art of needing no one's approval. The strength of letting your life speak for itself. Stay with me. Because by the time this is over, you will never look at explanation the same way again. Part 1. Why do we explain ourselves? Let's start at the root. Why do you explain yourself? Be honest. Not with me, with yourself. When you make a decision and someone questions it, what happens inside you? There is a tightness, a discomfort, a need, almost like an itch, to make them understand, to justify, to defend. Where does that come from? It comes from one of the deepest fears a human being can carry. The fear of being misunderstood. And underneath that fear is an even deeper one. The fear that if people truly see your choices, your reasoning, your life, they will reject you. So you explain. You over-explain. You talk too much. You give context that was never requested. You offer apologies that were never warranted. And here's the brutal truth that the Stoics understood thousands of years ago, that Marcus Aurelius wrote about from the seat of an empire, that Epictetus taught from the position of a former slave. People are not listening to your explanations to understand you. They are listening to find new ammunition to judge you. That is not cynicism. That is wisdom. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, the book we now call Meditations, that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. He was talking about fear. But that principle applies here too. You explain yourself because you are imagining the judgment that will come if you don't. But here's what actually happens when you over-explain. You signal anxiety. You signal self-doubt. You invite deeper scrutiny. You give people information they can use against you. And you exhaust yourself trying to manage other people's perceptions of you. All of that energy. All of that mental labor. Wasted. The Stoics had a word for things outside our control, ta ektos. External things. What other people think of you is external. It is not yours to control. It never was. And yet, how much of your life have you spent trying to control it? Part 2. The Emperor Who Stopped Explaining. Let's talk about Marcus Aurelius. Because Marcus was not born a philosopher. He was not born wise. He was born into wealth, elevated into power, and then crushed under the weight of an empire that never stopped demanding things from him. He fought wars he didn't start. He buried children. He governed a population of millions. He dealt with betrayal from people he trusted, incompetence from people he promoted, and envy from people he helped. And through all of it, one of his greatest disciplines was this. He stopped needing people to understand him. There is a passage in Meditations where Marcus writes about how the universe does not care for our explanations. Nature does not pause to justify itself. The sun does not explain why it rises. The river does not apologize for its current. And an emperor, a true leader, a person of real power, does not owe the crowd a breakdown of his reasoning. Now, hear me carefully. This is not arrogance. Marcus was one of the most humble men who ever lived. He wrote his private journals not for publication, but for himself, as reminders of how far he still had to go. This is not about thinking you are better than others. This is about understanding something far more profound. Explanation is not connection. Explanation is often performance. When you explain yourself unprompted, you are performing. You are staging a defense. You are running a trial in which you are both the defendant and the attorney, and the jury is made up of people who will vote however they were going to vote anyway. Marcus knew this. So he stopped performing. He acted. He decided. He moved. And when people misunderstood, he let them. Because his job was not to be understood. His job was to be just. To be disciplined. To do what was right. And he trusted, deeply, that a life well lived required no footnotes. Part 3. What silence actually communicates. Here is something that will shift the way you move through the world. Silence is not the absence of communication. Silence is communication. And it is often the most powerful kind. Think about the people in your life who command the most respect. Not the ones who talk the most. Not the ones who are loudest in the room. Not the ones who always have a reason for everything they do. The ones you respect most are usually the ones who are comfortable with silence. Who don't scramble to fill every pause. Who don't rush to justify their choices when questioned. There is a presence to that kind of person. A gravity. The Stoics called it dignitas, a kind of dignity that comes not from title or wealth, but from the way a person carries themselves. And here is the paradox that most people never discover. The less you explain, the more people trust your judgment. When you over-explain, you signal that you are not sure you made the right call. You signal that you need external validation. You signal that the opinion of the person in front of you has power over you. But when you act decisively and let your decisions stand without commentary, you signal confidence. You signal conviction. You signal that you have thought this through, and you do not need a second opinion. That is magnetic. People are drawn to it. Employers, partners, friends, everyone, they are drawn to people who seem settled in themselves. And the way you become settled in yourself is not by finding the perfect explanation. It is by no longer needing one. Part 4. The Slave Who Understood Freedom. Now I want to talk about Epictetus. Because if Marcus Aurelius represents the Stoic who had everything and still found peace, Epictetus represents something even more striking. The man who had nothing, and was free. Epictetus was born a slave. He was owned. He had no legal rights, no property, no freedom of movement. And yet, his philosophy, the ideas he shared that his students wrote down, became some of the most powerful ideas in human history. How? Because Epictetus understood something that his owners never did. You can imprison a body. You cannot imprison a mind that has chosen its own values. And one of the core values Epictetus taught was this. Do not give other people's opinions more power than they deserve. He said, and I want you to really sit with this, he said that people are disturbed not by events, but by their judgments about events. Someone criticizes you. That is an event. It is neutral. But then you make a judgment, this matters. I need to defend myself. I need to explain. I need them to understand. That judgment, not the criticism, is what causes your suffering. Epictetus was a slave. And he refused to be disturbed. Because he had discovered the one thing no one could take from him. His inner world. His values. His response to circumstances. And the moment you stop explaining yourself to people who do not matter, the moment you stop performing for an audience that was never qualified to judge you, you discover that same freedom. Not physical freedom. Not financial freedom. The freedom of a mind that no longer needs approval to function. Part 5. Who are you explaining yourself to? Let me ask you a direct question. The people you feel the need to explain yourself to most. Are they wiser than you? Are they living a life you want to emulate? Are they the kind of people whose judgment, whose values, whose perspective you genuinely respect? Or are they people who are stuck? Who are afraid? Who have never taken a real risk? Who have never built anything? Who have spent their lives doing exactly what was expected of them, and now feel entitled to question anyone who dares to do differently? Be honest. Because here is what I have observed in people who have done great things. They stopped explaining themselves to the wrong people. Not to everyone. There are people in your life who have earned the right to your reasoning. Your mentor. Your trusted partner. Your closest friend who has demonstrated, over years, that they want the best for you. Those people? Talk to them. Be open with them. Receive their feedback. But the coworker who questions your ambition? The relative who mocks your goals? The stranger on the internet who has an opinion about your life? You owe them nothing. Not a word. Not a defense. Not a single syllable of your energy. Seneca, another great Stoic, wrote about the importance of being selective with your time and attention. He wrote that life is not short. We make it short by wasting it on things that do not matter. Explaining yourself to unqualified critics is one of the greatest time wastes in human existence. Stop. Right now. Make the decision to stop. Part 6. The Practical Discipline. Okay. So how do you actually do this? Because knowing something intellectually and living it are two completely different things. The Stoics were not interested in theory for its own sake. They were interested in practice. In ascesis, discipline, exercise, the daily training of the mind. Here is a practical framework. A Stoic training regimen for the discipline of silence. First, pause before you speak. When someone questions your decision, before you respond, count to 3 in your head. Just 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, ask yourself, is this person someone whose opinion I genuinely value? And is this explanation for their benefit, or for mine? If it is for yours, if you are speaking out of anxiety, out of the need for approval, choose silence. Second, replace explanation with confidence. Instead of explaining why you made a choice, simply affirm it. I've thought it through and I'm confident in this direction. That is not arrogance. That is self-possession. Notice what that sentence does. It doesn't attack. It doesn't dismiss. But it does not negotiate. Third, let outcomes do the talking. The Stoics were big on this. Your life is your argument. If your choices are good, they will demonstrate their value over time. If your decisions are wise, the results will speak. You do not need to pre-argue your case. You do not need to convince anyone in advance. Do the work. Let it land. Trust the process. Fourth, notice the urge and release it. When you feel the pull to explain, really feel it, recognize it as fear. Name it. This is the fear of being misunderstood. You don't have to act on every impulse. You can observe it, acknowledge it, and choose differently. That is what Stoic practice actually looks like. Not suppressing the feeling. Noticing it without being ruled by it. Fifth, cultivate comfort with being misunderstood. This is the hardest one. Some people will not understand you. Some will judge you unfairly. Some will construct an image of you in their minds that has nothing to do with who you actually are. And that is okay. Marcus Aurelius was called a tyrant by people who had never met him. Epictetus was dismissed as just a slave. Seneca was accused of hypocrisy. They were misunderstood. And their ideas outlasted every person who misunderstood them by over 2,000 years. You do not need to be understood by everyone. You need to be understood by yourself. Part 7. The Deeper Truth. I want to go deeper now. Because this is not just about confidence or image management. This is about something much more fundamental. Over-explaining is a symptom of an identity that has been outsourced. When you need other people to validate your decisions, when their understanding feels necessary for you to feel okay about your choices, it means, on some level, you have placed the authority of your life in their hands. You have made them the judge. You have made their approval the verdict. And as long as that is true, you will never be free. Because people are inconsistent. Their opinions shift. Their moods color their perceptions. Their own insecurities project onto you. If your peace depends on their understanding, your peace is at the mercy of every stranger, every difficult family member, every person having a bad day who decides to take it out on your choices. That is no way to live. The Stoics taught, and this is the absolute core of their entire philosophy, that the only thing truly yours is your hegemonicon. Your ruling faculty. Your mind. Your will. Everything else is borrowed. Everything else is subject to fortune. But how you interpret, how you respond, what you value, who you decide to be, that is yours. And the moment you stop outsourcing the judgment of your life to other people, the moment you become the sole authority on your own choices, something extraordinary happens. You stop being anxious. Not because life gets easier. Life doesn't get easier. But because you stop fighting battles that were never yours to fight. You stop defending a case that needed no defense. You stop explaining a life that was already its own explanation. Part 8. The world needs people like this. I want to say something that might surprise you. The world is desperate, genuinely desperate, for people who have mastered this. We live in a time of extraordinary noise. Opinions everywhere. Criticism at scale. A culture that rewards reaction, that monetizes outrage, that turns every personal decision into a public debate. And in the middle of all of that noise, the person who is calm, the person who is settled, the person who acts from values rather than from fear, the person who does not scramble to manage perceptions, that person stands out like a monument. Because they are rare. Because most people are exhausting themselves trying to be understood by everyone, and in doing so, losing themselves entirely. You have a choice. You can spend your life in the court of public opinion, forever on trial, forever explaining, forever defending. Or you can step off that stage. You can build something real. You can invest in relationships that deserve your honesty. You can do work that matters. You can live according to values that don't require external ratification. You can be, in the truest sense of the word, free. Part 9. For the ones who are tired. I want to speak directly now to someone. Maybe that someone is you. You are tired. Not physically tired, though maybe that too, but tired in a deeper way. Tired of defending yourself to people who are never satisfied. Tired of shrinking so that others feel comfortable. Tired of justifying your ambition, your path, your choices. Tired of performing for an audience that was never going to applaud anyway. I see you. And I want to tell you what the Stoics would tell you. You can stop. Right now. Today. This moment. You can decide that the court is adjourned. That the trial is over. That you are the author of your own life and you have no further obligation to read it aloud for the approval of the crowd. That is not giving up. That is growing up. That is the maturity that Marcus Aurelius was pointing to when he wrote about acting with a quiet, unshakable confidence in what is right. That is the freedom Epictetus was teaching when he said that no one can disturb you without your permission. That is what it means to have a Stoic mindset. Not coldness. Not arrogance. Not indifference to others. But a settled, rooted, unshakable relationship with yourself that no one can destabilize. You stop explaining. You start living. If this reached you today, if something in this message landed somewhere real, then do one thing. Not for me. For yourself. Identify one relationship, one situation, one recurring conversation where you have been over-explaining yourself. And this week, just this week, practice silence. Not hostility. Not withdrawal. Just choose not to explain. And notice what happens inside you. Notice the discomfort. Notice how quickly it passes. Notice the clarity that comes after. That is your first rep, your first training session in the discipline of silence. And if you want more of this, if you want to go deeper into Stoic philosophy, into the psychology of power, into what it actually looks like to live by these principles in the modern world, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that bell. Because every week we go deeper. Every week we bring you content that will challenge you, stretch you, and arm you with wisdom that has survived thousands of years for a reason. The Stoic mindset is not a philosophy for the comfortable. It is a philosophy for the ones who refuse to stay small. Join us. We will see you in the next one.